In the abyss between galaxies, the Emperor's dream endured. The void was a dark wound upon the galaxy, bleeding light from dying stars and shattered worlds. Guilliman stood upon the bridge of Macragge's honour, his gaze fixed on the intricate lattices of the hololithic star map projected before him. The Imperium was fraying, its edges ragged and bleeding into chaos. Entire systems had fallen, not merely lost to war, but erased. Tyrannid hive fleets devouring planets in a single sweep. Chaos warbands leaving nothing but madness and ash. And orcs carving crude swathes of destruction across sectors once thought secure. Yet it was not just the scale of loss that pressed upon him. It was the shape of it. The Imperium had survived, yes, but it was becoming a hollow thing, a body without its soul. Guilliman's eyes traced the lines marking lost sectors and isolated garrisons, blinking in warning across the three-dimensional map. Each pulse of red or violet made his chest tighten, each flickering dot another testament of failure. And though he moved among men and machines as their lord and commander, Guilliman felt the weight of isolation deeper than any armor could shield him. He remembered the other Primarchs, his brothers, one by one, lost to death, to madness, or to a fate so terrible he could barely bring it to thought. He remembered the laugh of Lehman, the skill of Sanguinius, the strength of Vulcan. And he remembered Horus, the Emperor's favourite, fallen to ruin. The echo of their absence haunted every meeting, every manoeuvre, every waking moment of his command. How many sons did he make, Guilliman thought, only to cast them into ruin? The question was both grief and accusation. The Emperor had wrought humanity into a galaxy-spanning empire, had gifted it the might of godlike sons to shepherd it, and yet so many had perished, betrayed, or vanished into the shadows of history. Was this the cost of his vision? Was the Imperium merely a machine, and men and his sons nothing but expendable cogs? The room was quiet. Only the hum of the hololithic projectors and the low vibration of the ship's engines filled the air. Guilliman's gaze lifted to the viewport, where the stars burned cold and distant. Each light was a world, each world a crucible of human hope and suffering, and each world carried the weight of his command. His thoughts drifted to the Imperium Nihilist Crusade, his latest and most desperate effort to hold the galaxy together. It was a sprawling, fractured campaign, with fleets operating in isolated sectors, coordinating across light years through vox and psychic links, attempting to blunt the inexorable tide of chaos, tyrannids, and orcs. He had designed this crusade as a tapestry of defense and attack, a network of Imperium forces that could respond quickly to emerging threats. Yet even as he had orchestrated it, he knew the cracks were growing too fast. The Great Rift was a wound in reality, and all his calculations could not predict the madness that festered there. Guilliman's hands hovered over the edge of the command die, gloved fingers brushing against the polished metal. He felt every pulse of the ship's engines, every flicker of light across the hololith, as if they carried the heartbeat of the Imperium itself. It was heavy with expectation, heavy with failure, heavy with the responsibility of humanity's survival. He could see the fleets he commanded, miniature and yet immense. Each light was a battle-ready warship. He could see the scorched systems, the ones reduced to ruin by Xenos or Traitor, and those still standing by the thread of human will. For a moment, he imagined himself not as a commander, but as a patient in a galaxy-sized infirmary, tending to wounds that could not truly be healed. The loneliness of command was absolute. He had advisors, aides, Primaris lieutenants, even custodies to remind him that he was not alone. But no voice could fill the silence of a brother lost, the counsel of a mind forged like his own. In strategy meetings, he gave commands and listened to reports, but his decisions were his alone, and in that solitude, he carried the guilt of the Imperium as if it were a physical weight pressing on his spine. Was this the Emperor's plan, he wondered, leaning forward over the star map? Or is this merely the chaos of a galaxy too large for any one mind to control? The ghosts of the heresy still haunted him. He could recall the day he awoke to the cries of war, the campaigns where brother fought with brother, the brief glimmers of victory, the bitter betrayals. Those memories had hardened him, yes, but they had not dulled the ache. The Imperium was alive, yes, but it was bleeding, fracturing, and the smell of blood hung in every sector he monitored. A Primaris adjutant approached. Guilliman did not turn immediately. His attention was still locked on the map. "My lord," the voice said, "there are reports of new incursions from the eastern fringe." Guilliman's gaze lifted slowly, eyes sharp beneath a stoic mask of command. "Bring them forward." The adjutant obeyed, and the hololith shifted, displaying systems lost to Xenos fleets, the roots of Tyranid swarms, and the scattered Orc warbands converging on human settlements. Each report was a fracture in the Imperium's armor, each reading a testament to his failures. He saw how precarious the balance truly was, every sector held together only by his calculations, his orders, his unyielding will. The Imperium teetered on the brink. One wrong move, and trillions could die. And yet, the Emperor's light, the faint pulse of the Astronomicon, still burned. Even in its weakness, it reminded him that humanity endured, that he would endure. Guilliman's thoughts drifted briefly to his brothers once more, to Lehman, to Sanguinius, to Vulcan, dead or missing. Was he truly one of the only Primarchs left alive? Perhaps. He felt the ache of that possibility keenly, and yet he could not dwell on it. He had work to do. Imperium Nihilus could not wait for grief. It demanded his calculation, his precision, and his ruthlessness. He turned back to the map. His mind, though heavy, worked with the efficiency of a master strategist. Fleet formations were recalculated, patrols redirected. Every possibility, every contingency, every weakness in the enemy lines were examined, and all the while the galaxy continued to burn. He straightened, the weight of command still pressing down, and he welcomed it. For though he was alone, he was not powerless. He was Guilliman, and he would hold the Imperium, even if it bled through his hands like water through a sieve. How many sons did he make? He whispered again, only to cast them into ruin. The question was not for answer. It was a reminder. The Imperium was faltering. and only he could hold the line. Alone, burdened, but unyielding. The Eastern Fringe had always been a storm on the edge of the Imperium. Distant, dangerous, and unpredictable. Worlds burned in silence, fleets vanished without warning, and rumours of Xenos ambitions grew like weeds in a neglected garden. Guilliman had always monitored these sectors with precision, calculating patrol routes, fleet deployments, and orbital defences to the smallest detail. But the messages now reaching him carried a weight heavier than any calculation, heavier than any one strategist's mind could endure. The first transmission arrived as a whisper on the Voxnet, nearly lost in the static of 10,000 channels. An Inquisitor's voice, urgent, trembling with something beyond fear. Sector Theta 11. Entire Xenos fleets, gone. No chaos taint. Weapons unlike any recorded. The projection flickered, stabilizing slowly. Guilliman leaned forward, hands gripping the edge of his command die. His eyes traced the distortions across the hololith. Eldar craft worlds were reduced to debris fields. Tau battle fleets obliterated with precision. Entire orbital defense stations silenced, as though erased by a phantom hand. "This cannot be," he murmured, though the words were for no one. He felt the familiar ache in his chest. The Great Crusade had been predicated on order, on the certainty that mankind could impose its will across the galaxy. And yet here, in the uncharted edges of the Eastern Fringe, an unknown force had appeared and left only death in its wake. "Preliminary readings, my lord," said a Magos biologist, stepping forward, robes brushing the deck. Scans of the debris and the void around Theta 11 show energy signatures inconsistent with Imperium, Tau, or Eldar technology. The weapon discharge patterns, they are... Guilliman held up a hand. The projection flared, showing the remnants of entire fleets. "Impossible," he said. "Even a coordinated Tyranid assault would have left residue. Even Chaos fleets leave their mark. This is precise." The hololith zoomed in on the wreckage. Shards of Eldar hulls were twisted, folded into impossible shapes. The Tau vessels were atomized, vaporized with almost surgical efficiency. Guilliman's eyes narrowed as he studied the data. There were no warp scars, no corruption, no chaotic resonance. And yet the death of these fleets was complete, total, absolute. A second transmission arrived, this one from the edge of Tau space. Reports of similar destruction. More detail, but the same pattern. No warning, no trace of Chaos involvement, no Imperium identification. Witnesses described the attackers in terms that made even hardened fleet commanders shiver. Ships like leviathans, moving as though alive. Weapons that sing through the void. Energy flows like currents in an ocean. Guilliman's chest tightened. He could see it in his mind's eye. Ships bending light around themselves. Engines leaving trails of luminescent energy. Weapon arcs cutting through the vacuum in harmonious resonance. A perfect storm of death. Choreographed with intelligence and patience beyond the comprehension of any human mind. He turned to the aide standing by. "Have we verified the witnesses?" "Vox recordings, my lord. Visuals corroborate the fleet readings. Even Eldar observers, they confirm it. No taint, no corruption, nothing known in Imperium or Xenos archives." Guilliman exhaled slowly. He moved through the bridge with a measured gait, his armor catching the flickering light of the hololith. Every step was deliberate, precise, every thought a calculation, though the mind itself screamed warnings he could not ignore. A new power, or the ghost of an old one. He remembered the words of the Inquisitor. It is as though the space itself rose up and devoured them. Gilliman repeated the phrase silently, feeling its weight. The imagery was apt, and yet incomplete. Space could not act. Space did not kill. Something had moved through it, and it had killed with intent, precision, and grace. He returned to the star map. The destroyed fleets were scattered across thousands of light years, yet their annihilation had occurred within weeks, a scale of speed no known warp jump or Xenos technology could match. He could calculate travel times, response windows, probable fleet directions, but nothing aligned. The mathematics themselves were impossible. "What do we know of the attacker's origin?" he asked. The Magos shook his head. "Nothing, my lord. The sensors only detected passage, warp signatures, faint, but not corrupted, propulsion and power readings, unknown design principles. It's not Imperium, not Chaos, nor any Xenos technology currently catalogued." Gilliman frowned. He walked to the viewport. The Imperium's fleets were small against the void now. "We are not prepared," he thought. And yet he could not allow panic to spread. The Imperium depended on control, on order, on authority maintained even when all seemed lost. "Record everything," he said. "Every report, every transmission, every survivor account. Cross-reference all sensor logs. I want analysis of every weapon discharge, every ship movement pattern. Begin simulations immediately. We must find the logic in their pattern, if it exists." The room moved with silent obedience. Gilliman's presence alone focused them. His mind, however, raced faster than any aid can follow. If these attackers are not Chaos, not Xenos, then what are they? And why now? He recalled another fragment of a report, transmitted by an Eldar observer, forced into subspace relay. They move as though the void itself obeys them. Energy flows from their hulls like water. It sings. Our weapons pass through it and find nothing to strike. Gilliman's chest tightened at the imagery. Ships like leviathans. He knew that the universe held horrors beyond imagination, but the mind of a strategist still sought order. But no calculation satisfied him. The scale of this threat was beyond comprehension. He remembered the lessons of the Great Crusade: strategy, adaptability, and the certainty that the Emperor's sons could bend the galaxy to their will. And yet, he felt truly small. The Imperium stretched thin, battling enemies on every front. And now, somewhere in the eastern fringe, a force had arisen that had neither loyalty, nor heraldry, nor intent known to any living soul. Gilliman's gaze returned to the map. Vast empty swaths marked annihilated Xenos sectors, and beyond them nothing. Silence. "Mark this down," he said finally, his voice echoing through the chamber. "This is the beginning of a new variable. Not Chaos, not Tyrannid, not Orc. Something new, something unknown. And it will come for us all." He turned away from the hololith, the stars beneath him. The Imperium hung on a thread, and somewhere in the void, the Leviathans moved. The words of the Inquisitor returned to him once more. It is as though space itself rose up and devoured them. Guilliman did not speak. He did not need to. He only watched. The galaxy itself was trembling, and he understood deep in the marrow of his being that this was no ordinary enemy. This was the beginning of something greater, something that would change everything. Above Karos Beta lay a Necron fleet, cold, silent. Dozens of tomb ships, crescent-hulled and pulsing with necrodermis light, advanced in flawless formation. Their movements were mathematical, each vector calculated by intelligence older than humanity itself. They had come to investigate a wound in the stars. At first, the sensors of the Necron command vessel recorded only distortion. Space rippled, energy readings climbing beyond measure. The void itself seemed to hum, a resonance the Necrons could neither interpret nor control. Then the distortion bloomed. From the darkness unfolded shapes of light, massive, organic silhouettes, each ship gliding with a grace that defied mechanical comprehension. No engines were visible, no exhaust trails marked their path. The Necrons fired first. Emerald lances of Gauss energy crossed the stars, stripping molecules from the vacuum. The blast struck the luminous fleet and vanished, absorbed, refracted, swallowed by rippling surfaces that shimmered like water. The void ignited. From their flanks erupted beams of pure energy, arcing like lightning made liquid. The first wave of Necron cruisers disintegrated in silence, their hulls atomized, data cores erased before even registering damage. The second wave attempted evasive maneuvers, but the luminous vessels moved faster than light itself, folding through dimensions like fluid slipping through cracks. The Necron command vessel launched its doomsday cannon, the blast carving a hole through space itself, collapsing part of the enemy formation into a gravity well. But even as it did, the alien fleet adapted. Their light twisted, condensed, and in an instant, reality snapped. When the sensors cleared, the entire Necron armada was gone. So too was their enemy. All that remained was silence. Weeks later, that silence reached Terra. In the strategium of the Imperial Palace, the air was thick with tension. Guilliman stood before the hololithic array, its golden light reflecting against the ceramite plates of his armor. The Mechanicus Magi murmured among themselves, their voices distorted by vox filters. Custodes stood at the periphery, motionless like statues. A projection flared, grainy but unmistakable. It showed the total annihilation of the Necron fleet, the way their energy signatures winked out one by one, erased by weapons beyond current technology. Guilliman's expression hardened. So, even the dead cannot withstand them, he said quietly. Archmagos Varian Kell bowed his head, cables twitching from his robes. Lord Guilliman, analysis of residual data confirms that the attacking vessels emitted neither warp signatures nor conventional energy emissions. They seemed to exist within a phase state, between real space and the Imperium itself. And yet they entered the warp afterward, Guilliman replied. Affirmative. Their departure destabilized the local dimension. A temporary rupture. Then silence. Gilliman stared at the projection. The Necrons have stood against the Tyranids, the Orcs, even the warp itself. Yet they were destroyed as easily as we crush insects beneath our boots. The room was silent. For a long time the Primarch said nothing. His eyes, blue, clear, ancient, moved across the hololith, tracing the glowing arcs of warp space. Finally, he turned to his adjutants. "We must assume this fleet to be a threat. Its power exceeds anything known. Begin immediate coordination of a response force." A custodes stepped forward, his voice low but resonant. "The Adeptus Custodes stand ready, my lord. The Emperor's will is ours." Gilliman inclined his head. "We will also require the Grey Knights. Their understanding of the warp may give us an edge, however slim." "And the Death Watch?" asked another voice, this one belonging to Lord Commander Arcadian of the Imperial Navy. "Yes. If these creatures are Xenos in origin, we will need hunters who understand the unknown." He turned to the Mechanicus Magi. "Deploy a full cohort of Scutari and Titan legions from Mars. Let the Omnissire's forges roar again. I want the Imperial Knights of House Cadmus and Turin recalled from the Indomitus front. They will stand vigil here." One by one, confirmations echoed through the chamber, each pledge like the tolling of a great bell. Still, Gilliman's thoughts churned beneath his calm surface. He could feel the weight of the galaxy pressing upon him, the old fatigue of a commander who had seen too much, lost too many, and yet must never falter. The hololith shifted again. Projections of fleet formations flickered across the display. The Custodes, arrayed in golden arcs around Terra. The Grey Knights and the Death Watch, positioned to intercept in the outer system. Mechanicus war fleets aligned with the Phalanx itself. Dawn's mighty fortress ship, still orbiting Saturn like a sun of iron. It was a sight, both magnificent and desperate. The last gathering of the Emperor's might. "Where will they go next?" Gilliman said to himself. "They have cut through Necrons, Eldar and Tau alike." He looked across the chamber, meeting the eyes of generals, Magi, Custodes. "Prepare the defenses, mobilize the void shields, the orbital bastions, and the planetary macro cannon arrays. Every fortress, every fleet, every mind must be ready. If this enemy means to turn its gaze to the Imperium, then we must be ready with all our strength." He dismissed the room. The officers bowed, saluted, or chanted binary benedictions before departing. Only a handful remained, Custodes, silent as stone. "Perhaps this is what the Emperor foresaw," he murmured. "Not the warp, not corruption, but something beyond it." As the thought passed his lips, the strategium trembled. At first it was subtle, a vibration running through the marble floor. Then the light dimmed, the hololith flickered, the air itself began to hum. Gilliman turned sharply, his warrior's instincts flaring. "Report! My lord, massive warp activity detected. Origin, Terra orbit." The entire chamber ignited in crimson light. Alarm runes flashed. The Vox burst alive with overlapping voices. Fleet captains, orbital defense stations, astropathic screams. Gilliman strode to the die. "Show me." The hololith reformed, its projection expanding outward. The entire solar system shimmered in pale blue, then ruptured. A rift, vast and spiraling, tore open above Terra itself. The warp bled into real space. Clouds darkened. Lightning lanced across the upper atmosphere. "Impossible," whispered one of the Magi. "No warp fissure could manifest this close to the Emperor's light." Guilliman felt his pulse steady. Even in horror, discipline anchored him. "Signal all the fleets, Custodes, Grey Knights, Imperial Navy, all to battle stations, phalanx to high orbit. Prepare for immediate engagement." The rift widened. Energy cascaded from it like waterfalls of fire. The void screamed as reality strained to contain the breach. Guilliman watched in silence, his heart hammering beneath his blue armor. But then, movement. From the rift, something vast stirred. Not chaos-born, not demonic, but vast, deliberate, radiant. The light dimmed. "Contact," a voice cried. Massive structure emerging. Dimensions beyond measurement. Approach vector directly towards Terra. Through the void, Guilliman saw it. A silhouette, immense and gliding, shaped like a manta. Its hull gleamed with argent light, refracting through the warp as though made of mercury. The palace trembled. Custodes drew their spears. The Magi muttered prayers. Guilliman's gaze hardened. He raised his voice above the rising storm. "Hold fire until my command. Whatever emerges, we face it as sons of the Emperor." The rift's light bathed the chamber in blue fire. The shadow of the vessel grew, consuming the stars themselves. The sky above Terra cracked open. It was not a warp storm as the galaxy had come to know them, not a swirling bruise of madness and colour, but something far colder, far more deliberate. The void itself split like paper beneath a blade, a rift unfolding with the slow inevitability of a god's hand. At the heart of that wound, something emerged. The light of the sun dimmed. The void beyond shimmered with an unnatural hue. Guilliman stood upon the observation platform of the Eternity Gate's high bastion, the air around him trembling with the growl of void shields cycling to maximum. Servo skulls hovered in tight patterns around the Primarch, feeding him data streams from the orbital defenses. The rift expanded. A ship emerged. Its hull was black metal streaked with veins of silver and gold. Its design utterly alien, yet unmistakably human in aesthetic purpose. It bore no sigils of the Imperium, no wings, no aquila, yet its structure carried that same stern symmetry of Imperium warcraft, refined to a degree the Mechanicus had long forgotten. Its prow was shaped like a blade, its flanks lined with glowing apertures that hummed with restrained power. Guilliman's lips tightened as he realized the scale. The vessel was larger than Macrage's honor, longer even than the Gloriana-class flagships of the Great Crusade, a thing of impossible craftsmanship and monstrous presence. Around it, the heavens screamed. Astropaths on Terra howled in agony as their minds brushed its shadow in the warp. 1,000 warning runes pulsed crimson across the hololiths before Guilliman. Defense platforms, orbital rings, and the battle fleets of Sol all shifted into attack positions. Macro cannons and lance batteries tracking the newcomer. But the ship did not fire. It was simply there, a leviathan wrapped in power, haloed by the dying embers of the warp rift. "Lord Commander," intoned Magos Dominus Hysterion, his mechanical voice jittering across vox strings. "No hostile targeting signatures detected. Its weapons remain cold." Guilliman's eyes narrowed. "That's unusual. All reports spoke of immediate annihilation. Entire fleets destroyed without transmission or parley." "Confirmed, my lord," replied the Magos. "Energy readings inconsistent with any known Xenos technology. Yet, no aggression is present. The ship is listening." Guilliman's jaw flexed. Around him, the command die bristled with custodies in gleaming auramite, their halberds humming with restrained energy. Every man and woman in that chamber was poised between reverence and terror, staring up at the hololithic projection of the vessel above them. "Order all batteries to cold," Guilliman said at last. "If it wished to destroy us, it would have done it the moment it breached real space." The order rippled through 100 Vox networks at once. The guns of the Imperium, the most fearsome concentration of firepower in the galaxy, froze in obedience. "Magos," Guilliman continued, "scan its hull. Identify the power source." Runes flickered as Hysterion's many eyes swiveled and adjusted. "Inconclusive. Its energy output exceeds even the Mechanicum's most efficient plasma cores. And yet, it is stable, controlled." Then the machine priest paused. His mechadendrites stiffened. "My lord, the vessel is transmitting." Guilliman turned. "Meaning?" "It is attempting to open a communication channel." Across the chamber, tension thickened. Custodies angled their weapons slightly toward the ceiling, as if the threat would manifest itself from the air. The Magos's voice quavered slightly, the metallic timbre betraying unease. "What is the source code?" Guilliman demanded. "There is no code," Hysterion said slowly. "No cipher. It is open. Binary, Vox, and..." He froze. "Speak, Magos," Guilliman barked. The Magos hesitated, then turned, all lenses focusing on the Primarch. "The transmission is in High Gothic," he whispered. "Unencrypted. Clear. Human." The words seemed to hang in the chamber like a heresy. Guilliman felt his heart constrict. Every instinct screamed caution. His eyes locked on the viewing window, on that colossal ship floating serenely above the cradle of mankind. "Play the message," he ordered. The Vox thrones hummed. A pulse of static filled the air. Then a voice, deep and calm, rolled through the chamber. "This is Nero Thalassar, Primarch of the Emperor's Tide. I have come to answer his call." For a moment, the world stopped. Every sound in the command chamber died. The breath of 1,000 soldiers seemed to vanish. The words echoed through the hololithic chamber like thunder whispered through water. "Primarch." Guilliman's hands flexed around the railing before him. He said nothing, staring up at the projection as if his mind refused to accept what his ears had just heard. The custodies looked to him, awaiting his command. None spoke. A Primarch? Impossible. The Emperor's work had ended over 10,000 years ago. The vaults that birthed his sons had been shattered or lost. their secrets vanished. The 20 Primarchs were either dead, corrupted, or lost. And yet here was one calling to him from orbit above Terra. Guilliman's mind raced. Could this be some chaos trick? Some demonic mimicry intended to deceive him? But the warp itself had recoiled from the vessel. He could feel it. The same subtle pressure he had known when standing near the Golden Throne. A force that displaced the Imperium rather than drawing from it. He breathed slowly, forcing discipline into his thoughts. "Do not respond yet," he said at last. "Yes, Lord Commander." He studied the Magos. "Reconfirm. You are certain this is a human transmission?" "Beyond doubt. Syntax and phonetics consistent with pre-heresy High Gothic dialects. There is no demonic interference. It is pure." Guilliman's mind whirred with strategy, faith and suspicion all at once. If this was a lie, it was the most precise lie ever told. And if it was truth... He exhaled and straightened to his full height. "Send a reply." The custodes shifted subtly, surprised. Guilliman's voice was steady. "Inform this Nero that I will meet with him in person, alone. No fleets, no fire. I will transmit coordinates for a secure landing within the Sanctum's outer court." He turned to his guard. "Prepare the field. If this is deceit, I will end it myself." The custodes bowed in unison. Moments later, the great ship stirred. A smaller vessel detached from its flank. A sleek, gunmetal craft, no larger than a Thunderhawk, but shaped with alien grace. It cut through the void and began its descent toward the throne world, trailing a shimmer of energy like molten silver. Guilliman watched it descend from the viewing spire, his expression unreadable. His mind was a storm, calculation and disbelief warring against the faint, impossible spark of hope. A Primarch? Was it one of his lost brothers, hidden or forgotten by the Emperor's hand, or some weapon awakened in secret for an age such as this? He could not know. He only knew that the shadow above Terra had spoken in the tongue of man and claimed bloodline equal to his own. As the shuttle pierced the upper atmosphere, a streak of light against the clouds, Guilliman turned and strode from the chamber. Custodes fell into formation beside him, their spears gleaming beneath the lumen strips. His steps were measured, each one echoing through the adamantium corridors of the Sanctum Imperialis. "Be wary, Rebute," his father's voice whispered from memory. "Hope blinds faster than faith." He exhaled through clenched teeth. Perhaps so. But if there was even the smallest chance that this Nero Thalasar was truth, that one of the Emperor's sons yet lived, then Guilliman would see it with his own eyes. He would look upon this stranger and judge the light in his soul. And if that light proved false, then the Lord Commander of the Imperium would extinguish it himself. The landing bay of the Sanctum Imperialis groaned beneath the pressure of the descending ship. Hurricane-force winds tore through the chamber as the shuttle came to rest, its engines howling like beasts caged in iron. Servitors and armored guards scattered from the landing zone, cloaks snapping in the gale. The glow of the thrusters painted the marble floor in molten gold. Rebute Guilliman stood at the heart of it all, motionless. The light of the burning engines washed over his blue armor, glinting from the laurels and sigils etched into its plate. Around him stood the Adeptus Custodes in perfect formation, their halberds angled toward the unknown. Yet even the Primarch of the 8th Legion felt the faintest tremor of unease stir within him. He did not show it, of course. His posture was a study in control. But deep within, beneath the centuries of command and the burden of a dying Imperium, there was something else. A pulse of anticipation, a whisper of fear. The shuttle touched down with a hiss of steam. Its hull gleamed with metals unknown to the Mechanicus, smooth, seamless, and inscribed with faint lines of script that shimmered like silver veins. Its surface bore no sign of the warp, no corruption, only a design so elegant it was almost painful to behold. A ramp extended with precision. The air shimmered. And then he emerged. The first figure to step forth was immense, taller than Guilliman by perhaps the width of a hand, his movements imbued with effortless command. His armor was the color of a deep ocean steel, chased with gold filigree and marked by an ancient aquila across the chest, the kind not seen since the dawn of the Great Crusade. On his pauldrons rested the engraved image of a kraken, its tentacles entwined around a rising sun. His face was unmistakably human, too human perhaps, in its balance of strength and grace. A square jaw, framed by dark hair streaked with silver, a soldier's brow, shadowed by a gaze of strange calm. But his eyes, those eyes, were like molten silver, gleaming as if lit from within, and they shimmered faintly when he moved, reflecting every lumen of the hall like mirrors of liquid metal. Behind him came 2 Astartes, giants clad in armor unlike Guilliman had ever seen, sleek, contoured, the plates interlocking with magnetic precision, glowing faintly with power lines of azure light. Their helmets were smooth and motionless, their pauldrons marked by the same kraken sigil as their lord. The 3 advanced with unhurried grace. The Custodes shifted as one, their spears rising, but Guilliman raised a single hand, halting them. His other hand, though, twitched instinctively toward his sword. Every instinct, honed by millennia of war, told him to be ready. The stranger's weapon, a great trident of black and gold, taller than a man, rested easily in his hand. The weapon hummed faintly, not with warp energy, but something older, purer. As Nero Thalassar drew near, his silver gaze found Guilliman's. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. 2 demigods, 2 sons of the same impossible father, standing beneath the golden vaults of mankind's last sanctuary. Then Guilliman's gauntlet closed around the hilt of his sword. The sound of shifting ceramite filled the air. Nero noticed it instantly. He stopped, and then, to Guilliman's surprise, spoke. "Rebute Guilliman," he said, his voice deep but smooth, carrying an echo that seemed to vibrate through the air. Guilliman froze. Nero inclined his head, not in submission, but in recognition. "Be at peace. I mean you no harm." Then, without hesitation, he turned the trident in his grip and lowered it. He held it out before him, reversed, the haft extended toward Guilliman in a gesture as ancient as the legions themselves. "Take this," Nero said solemnly, "a symbol of surrender, a token that I come as kin, not foe." For several long seconds, Guilliman did not move. His custodies were statues of gold, waiting for his command. The hum of the shuttle's cooling engines was the only sound. But finally, Guilliman stepped forward. He took the trident. It was heavier than it looked, impossibly so. The moment his hand closed around it, he felt its weight resonate through his armor, as if the weapon carried a presence of its own. It was not psychic, rather it was real, solid, eternal. He looked back at the man before him. "You surrender your weapon so easily," Guilliman said, his tone measured and cold. "That is either the act of a fool, or one who knows he cannot fall." Nero's lips curved into a faint smile. "It is neither. It is the act of one who wishes to speak." Guilliman's expression did not soften. "Then speak plainly. How do you know my name?" The question hung between them, sharp as a blade. Nero's silver eyes flickered, the faintest shadow crossing them. He seemed genuinely surprised. Then his gaze lowered, and for the first time, the immense figure's voice carried something closer to sorrow. "Because," he said quietly, "you were one of the first of us I ever saw." Guilliman felt a chill trace down his spine. Nero looked up again, meeting his gaze squarely. "We have much to discuss, brother." The word hung heavy in the air, a word Guilliman could not yet bring himself to believe. He gestured sharply for his custodies to stand down, then motioned for Nero to follow. "Very well," Guilliman said. "We will talk, but not here." They walked together through the towering corridors of the Sanctum Imperialis, the echo of their armored steps reverberating through the gold-lined halls. Custodies and soldiers alike bowed or froze in awe as the two giants passed, one known, one newly born into legend. Guilliman's mind was a storm. Every instinct demanded caution. Every logic chain screamed that this could not be real. But there was something in Nero's presence, a stillness, an aura of command that felt right. They entered the strategium, its hollow globes casting shifting constellations across the chamber. Guilliman motioned for the custodies to remain outside. The two Primarchs stood alone amid the galaxy's holographic sprawl. For a moment, neither spoke. Guilliman broke the silence first. "Tell me then, Nero Thalassar," he said, his voice echoing in the chamber. "Where do you come from? What are you?" Nero's gaze turned toward the hololithic display of the galaxy, a sea of light and darkness, the rift bisecting it like a wound. His silver eyes reflected the stars. "From the tide beyond the stars," he said, "where our father sent me." Guilliman's jaw clenched. "Riddles," he muttered. "You sound like Lorgar before his fall. I will not play games with words." He turned sharply, the trident still clutched in one hand. "If you are what you claim to be, then speak truth. If not, I will know soon enough." Nero's faint smile returned. It was not mocking, merely knowing. "Very well," he said softly. "You deserve the truth, Rabute, as do all who still serve the dream that he built." He stepped closer, the light from the hololithic stars dancing across his armor. "I will tell you everything," Nero said, "about where I have been, about the world he made beyond the edge of this galaxy, and about why I have returned now." Guilliman met his gaze, wary, unyielding, yet somewhere deep within a spark of something long buried stirred. Hope, a dangerous and fragile thing. And as the last echoes of Nero's words faded into the golden silence of the Strategium, Guilliman felt the uneasy truth in his bones. Whatever this man was, brother, imposter, or something else entirely, the Imperium of man would never be the same again. The Strategium was silent, but for the hum of ancient cogitators and the faint tremor of the Astronomican's pulse above. The hololithic stars drifted slowly across the air, washing blue light over the two giants who stood at the center of the chamber. Guilliman crossed his arms over his chest. Before him, Nero Thalassar, the so-called Primarch of the Emperor's Tide, stood at ease, his trident now resting upright beside him like a banner. "Begin," Guilliman said at last. "Start from the beginning. Tell me what you are." Nero bowed his head, not in submission, but out of respect. "Then listen well, brother," he said, "for this tale begins in the deeps, in the darkness beneath the waves, where no sun has ever touched. I was found," Nero began, "on a world called Thalassar Prime, a world drowned in its own storms." As he spoke, his voice took on a distant cadence, as if he was seeing it again through the mists of time. "My world was an ocean without end, a world of iron skies and endless tempests, where lightning walked the horizon and waves rose taller than mountains. The few land masses that remained were jagged volcanic scars. The rest of civilization clung to the surface of the sea in floating citadels. Vast chains of metal and adamantine tethered together like drifting continents. And below, there were the abyssal cities, places of glass and steel sunk into the depths. Mankind had adapted, learned to breathe through machines, to harvest light from plankton and heat from volcanic vents. It was a world of sailors, divers, and storm-born warriors. He smiled faintly, though there was no warmth in it. "I was one of them." Guilliman said nothing. "I was found in the wreckage of a crashed ship," Nero continued. "A storm had ripped the vessel from the sky. When they pulled me from the sea, I was unbroken. The chieftains who ruled Pelagon, the great floating citadel, took me in as an omen, a child born of the abyss, untouched by the storm. I grew faster than any man, stronger. My eyes changed, silver, to see through the black water. My lungs could hold the breath of the deep for hours. They called me the Abyssal Sun. By the time I came of age, I ruled the fleets of Pelagon, uniting the drifting cities into one nation. We waged war against the storm pirates and the leviathans that rose from the depths. We conquered the skies with thunder wings and learned to fight both in air and sea. Gilliman's gaze lingered on Nero's shimmering eyes, understanding for the first time that they were not unnatural, but evolved, adapted. Nero turned, gesturing at the hololithic map of the galaxy. And then, he came. The Emperor, Gilliman said flatly. Nero nodded. Yes. The storm parted one day, for the first time in living memory. Through that rift in the clouds descended a vessel of gold and white. It cut through the thunder like a blade. I knew, even before he set foot upon the citadel, that he was the one I had been waiting for. Gilliman felt something stir inside him, a faint echo of his own memory, his own meeting with the father of mankind. The Emperor looked upon me, Nero said quietly, and I felt my blood ignite. He called me by my name, Nero Thalassar, as though he had known me since my first breath. He told me who I truly was, what I was, one of his sons, scattered across the stars. He paused, his expression distant. When I knelt before him, he placed his hand upon my brow, and the sea itself stilled. The storms broke. For the first time in recorded history, Thalassar Prime saw sunlight. I knew then that I would follow him to the ends of the galaxy. Nero's tone hardened as he continued. My legion came soon after, the Emperor's Tide. We were forged for exploration, for naval warfare, for the reclamation of the void. We were masters of ship-to-ship combat and atmospheric assault. We could breach orbit and strike from the clouds before our enemies even raised their guns. We were his explorers and his stormbreakers. When the Great Crusade expanded beyond the borders of known space, it was often us who went first, charting the unknown, cutting paths through warp storms, scouting for lost human colonies. He smiled faintly, though the light in his eyes dimmed with memory. And when war came, we struck like the tide itself, sudden, overwhelming, unrelenting. The ebb and flow, our favoured tactic. Draw them in, let them think us spent, then crush down upon them with a fury that no fleet could withstand. Gilliman studied him in silence. The man spoke with a soldier's cadence, precise, factual. Not the delusions of a madman, but still, he could not let belief cloud his judgment. You fought in the Great Crusade, Gilliman said. With us. Nero's gaze shifted. Yes. Whom did you fight beside? Gilliman's tone sharpened. Nero's eyes softened with memory. I remember Horus at his height and his fierce lunar wolves, a warrior with laughter in his heart and lightning in his veins. I remember fighting beside Lehman and his savage wolves. Vulcan I met only once, upon the Ash Worlds. And you, Rabute. I fought with you. Gilliman stiffened. Nero continued, his tone lowering. Do not look so surprised. We were not that close. You were a builder then, a commander who saw order in all things. I was the one sent to map the unknown, to strike where the Emperor's light had not yet reached. We shared few battlefields, but enough for me to know you by face and by name. Gilliman said nothing. His mind spun. Images of a dozen campaigns flashed through his memory. each with countless allied forces. Could one of them have been the Emperor's tide? Could the records have been erased, as Nero claimed? He turned slightly away, his voice hard. If what you say is true, then why has no record of you or your legion survived? Why can I not remember? Nero's expression grew grim. Because our father willed it so. He stepped closer, the light of the hololithic stars glinting from his silver eyes. When the Great Crusade neared its end, the Emperor summoned me to him in secret. He showed me visions, terrible, impossible visions. A civil war, the burning of Terra, the death of our brothers. He told me the storm for mankind's soul was coming, and that when it came, the galaxy itself would drown. So he gave me my mission, to take my legion and vanish beyond the stars, to go where none could follow, to preserve something of humanity should his dream turn to ash. Nero's breath caught, his expression tightening. Nero nodded slowly. He said that the galaxy and mankind would burn should he lose the coming war, and that he could not gamble mankind's future without first ensuring its survival. The Emperor had spent decades learning the ways of both the warp and the ancient webway, and he believed there was a way only he knew about, to travel beyond our galaxy. He believed he had found a way, through the ruins of the old ones, and a corridor in the webway that led to another place, another galaxy, to Andromeda. He fell silent. The weight of it hung heavy in the air. Guilliman looked at him for a long while, the hard skepticism in his gaze flickering with something else. Confusion, maybe even awe. You speak of impossible things, he said at last. If this is true, then history itself has been rewritten. Nero met his gaze. History, brother, has always been written by those who survived. He turned his eyes toward the hololithic stars again. And I have survived longer than most. For a long moment, there was only silence, the deep humming silence of the throne world's heart. Guilliman said nothing, but deep within him, the cold rationality of his mind was beginning to fracture under the weight of something he could no longer deny. The man before him was no imposter. He was something else, something real, something lost. The strategium felt smaller now, as though the weight of what Nero Thalassar had revealed had reshaped the very air. The hololithic stars drifted in silence between them, casting a ghostly light across their faces. Guilliman stood at the table's edge, his gauntlets flexing soundlessly. His breath was slow, measured, though his mind burned with questions that refused to settle. You said the Emperor willed your disappearance, Guilliman began at last. That he foresaw the heresy and sent you beyond the stars to preserve mankind. But if that is true, his gaze rose, sharp as a blade. Then why do I not remember you? Why does no record of you or your legion exist? Not even the Mechanicum's deepest archives hold a trace of the Emperor's tide. Why, Nero? Why lie to us all? For a moment, Nero said nothing. He merely looked at his brother, the light of the hololithic suns reflected in his silver eyes. There was no arrogance in his face, only an immense, weary calm, the calm of a man who had carried the truth for too long. The Emperor did not lie, Nero said finally. He protected you. Guilliman's expression darkened. Protected me. By excising you from history, by tampering with my memory. Nero inclined his head. Yes, that is exactly why. Guilliman took a step forward. The chamber seemed to tighten around his presence. Explain yourself. Nero drew a slow breath. Our father foresaw the coming war, but not its shape. He could not see who among his sons would fall, only that some would. He saw brother turning upon brother, Primarchs tearing the Imperium asunder in the name of pride, madness, or damnation. And so he made his choice. He could not trust any of us, not even you, Rabute, with the knowledge of what he intended. His voice lowered, resonant and sorrowful. If word of my mission had spread, if the traitors or their allies in the warp had learned that a path beyond the galaxy existed, they might have followed. They might have corrupted it. The Emperor feared that even a whisper of my existence could doom the task before it began. Guilliman said nothing. His mind worked furiously, dissecting each word as if testing the structural integrity of a bridge under stress. Nero continued. He came to me in the night, in silence. He spoke of an ancient corridor buried deep within the webway, one that stretched beyond the galactic rim and into the black void between galaxies. He believed that the Old Ones had built it long before mankind's dawn, a back door through the warp's outer storms. He looked away, to the hololithic projection of Terra's shining core. He told me to take a fleet, my legion and as many colonists as could be spared, to vanish into the dark, to build anew, a second flame of mankind, hidden beyond the storm. If his dream were to fall, another would survive. Guilliman's voice was colder now. So he trusted you with this, and none of us. Nero met his gaze again. He knew what his sons were capable of. A silence fell that seemed to swallow the chamber whole. Guilliman's jaw tightened. But he erased you from my mind. Nero nodded. Not only you, all of you. He feared that if even a hint of the Emperor's tide remained, chaos would find it and twist it. So he severed the memory at its root. He told me that when I returned, if I ever returned, none of my brothers would remember my face. He called it the hardest command he had ever given. The words hung there, suspended like a blade above them both. Guilliman turned away, staring into the endless starfield. He wanted to deny it, to call it impossible, but the Emperor's methods had always been inscrutable, cruel in the service of purpose. At last, he said quietly, I understand why he did it. Nero's head tilted slightly. He could not risk another betrayal, Guilliman went on. Not even the hint of one. If he saw a storm coming that would break the galaxy, he would cut out anything that could draw it nearer. Logic demands no less. Nero smiled faintly. Spoken like the brother I remember. Guilliman turned back. You said your mission was to preserve humanity. Was it a success? For the first time since his arrival, Nero's expression shifted, the faintest trace of pride lighting his features. He stepped closer to the hololithic table and reached toward the stars, manipulating the controls with a gesture. The hologram shifted, the Milky Way receding into a swirl of light until another, smaller spiral appeared beside it. Andromeda. You could say that, Nero said. He drew a deep breath, his voice lowering. We departed through the Emperor's secret path, the Andromedan corridor. It was like sailing through the veins of a god. The webway was different there, older, silent. The walls of reality thin enough to hear the echo of our own thoughts. We travelled for decades, though in truth, time lost all meaning. Days bled into years, years into centuries. The fleet endured storms of unreality that made the warp here seem merciful. Guilliman watched him, silent. The first great horror came in the dark between our galaxies, Nero said. Creatures that dwelled beyond the warp's edge. Vast leviathans that swam through the void itself. They fed upon psychic light. When we passed, they turned toward us like sharks scenting blood. We fought them for weeks, our ships cracking under their claws, our navigators driven to madness. In the end, we had to burn half our fleet just to drive them off. The cost was immeasurable. He looked down briefly, then continued. Later we encountered something else, a swarm of creatures unlike any we had ever seen. We did not know their name then, but now I suspect they were what your records now call the Tyranids, long before their arrival here. Their hive ships followed us for years through the dark, until we found the ruins of what the Emperor had spoken of, relics of the Old Ones. He gestured to the hologram, zooming in on a distant cluster of stars. Dead worlds, rings of shattered moons, monoliths the size of continents, carved with symbols older than mankind. We sheltered there, refitted our ships, learned their machines. That is where we discovered how to pierce the void between galaxies entirely. The last gate. Guilliman's eyes narrowed. A gate. Nero nodded. A bridge between realities. The Old Ones must have used it to flee their enemies. It flung us across the last gulf, directly into the Andromeda galaxy. When we emerged, the warp was calm, quiet. It was pure. He paused, his voice softening with something like wonder. We made landfall upon a world of golden seas and black mountains. The colonists called it Nereid. There we built anew, not an Imperium, but a dominion, a union of human worlds, free from corruption, guided by the tenets our father once dreamed of. He turned to Guilliman, the faintest smile ghosting across his lips. The Dominion of Man, we called it. It grew, slowly but steadily. Our ships seeded hundreds of worlds across the galactic arm. Our technologies advanced, unburdened by the Mechanicum's dogma. Humanity flourished there, Rabute. For thousands of years we have thrived. Guilliman said nothing for a long while. His mind swirled with disbelief, awe, and a strange, burning envy. A galaxy untouched by chaos, humanity unshackled from faith and fear. It sounded like a fantasy, yet Nero's every word carried the ring of truth. The hololithic map still shimmered above the Strategium's center, casting its ghostly light across the walls like the reflection of a distant sea. The image of Andromeda spun slowly in the void, a second galaxy, vast and alien, yet somehow more peaceful than the one that had birthed them both. Guilliman stood at its edge. Nero Thalasar watched him with quiet patience, his hands clasped behind his back, the faint hum of his trident resonating softly through the chamber. At last, Guilliman spoke. "You claim your dominion flourished," he said, his voice low, weighed with suspicion and awe alike. "That mankind in Andromeda became something greater, freer. But I know humanity. It does not advance without conflict. So tell me, how did you become so advanced? How did you thrive without war?" A faint smile tugged at Nero's mouth, though it was not one of mirth. "Who said there was no war?" he said softly. "In the beginning, the Dominion carried the same dream that Father gave us, unity through conquest. We thought ourselves the torchbearers of the Great Crusade reborn." He stepped forward and gestured toward the holographic projection, the image magnified, revealing a cluster of stars, hundreds of glowing worlds connected by faint silver lines. "Our fleet spread like wildfire," Nero continued. "We brought light to the void. We destroyed every Xenos we found, every alien stronghold, every outpost that dared resist mankind's rebirth. We annihilated them with zero mercy, as we were bred to do." The silver in his eyes gleamed with cold remembrance. "We had salvaged Old One technologies, weapons that defied the laws of matter and thought. Our ships could dissolve enemy vessels in seconds, erase fleets in bursts of silent light. Entire species vanished before they could understand what we were." Guilliman frowned. "You butchered them all." Nero's gaze did not waver. "As we were taught to. The Emperor's will was clear. Humanity must endure, no matter the cost. And for a time we did. Hundreds of colony worlds flourished beneath new suns. Our fleet stretched from one arm of the galaxy to the other. We thought ourselves unstoppable." He turned from the projection, his expression darkening. "Until we met them." Guilliman's eyes narrowed. "Met who?" "A Xenos empire, known as the Hierarchene," Nero said. "They were old, older than any species I have since encountered. Their empire spanned dozens of systems. Their fleets were vast, their weapons formidable. We mistook them for another foe to be simply purged, and so we struck." He exhaled slowly, his voice lowering to a growl. "It was a war unlike any I had fought. Their weapons burned through our void shields. Their ships bent light itself. But still, we prevailed. We scoured their worlds, burned their cities, and hunted them to extinction." He paused. "But before their last world fell, the Hierarchene unleashed their final weapon, a curse born of their own genius, a virus engineered to kill only us. It spread through the biosignature of human DNA, adapting faster than any cure could be found." Guilliman's expression hardened. "A biological exterminatus." Nero nodded. "It was their final revenge. Within a decade, the virus had reached every human world. Millions died in their sleep. Entire fleets drifted silent, their crews dead at their stations. Our dominion collapsed into madness and quarantine. Even the Astartes of the Emperor's Tide were not immune. For centuries, I watched our numbers dwindle, until barely 1 in 100 of us remained." He turned to face Guilliman fully, his voice heavy but calm. "For the first time, brother, I knew despair. The air between them seemed to still, as though the ghosts of those lost souls haunted the words themselves. And yet, Nero continued, it was not the end. He looked up, his silver eyes glinting like light on deep water. Amid our ruin, we received a signal, not of threat, but of thanks. It came from beyond the dead systems of the Hurricane, from other Xenos beings. They told us that the Hurricane had enslaved their species for millennia, forcing them to be slaves. Our destruction of that empire had freed them, and in gratitude, they offered us salvation. Gilliman's tone turned cold. And you believed them? Nero smiled faintly. Of course not. I prepared for war. He began to pace slowly, the echo of his boots soft against the marble floor. We armed every available ship. We readied our fleet. And when their envoys arrived, small vessels, unarmed, I expected treachery. But they brought no weapons, only knowledge. They came not as conquerors, but as healers. Their scientists studied the virus, mapping its shifting code, and devised a cure. Gilliman's eyes narrowed. You accepted help from the Xenos. I accepted life, Nero said sharply. I was bred for war, yes, trained to kill Xenos without hesitation, but I had no choice. My people, our people, were dying, our children gasping out their last breaths as the stars grew cold. I swallowed my pride, and I listened. He paused, the steel in his voice softening into something almost human. And they kept their word. The cure has worked. Humanity lived. For a moment, neither spoke. The faint hum of the hololithic display was the only sound. Nero looked up again. In time, they shared more than their medicine. They shared their science, technology, and philosophy. They taught us to see the galaxy not as prey and predator, but as a balance, fragile, yet worth preserving. Our fleets grew mightier, our weapons even deadlier, our minds sharper. And we learned restraint. He smiled slightly, though there was no arrogance in it. Make no mistake, brother. Humanity is the dominant power in Andromeda. Our fleets can shatter moons. Our worlds are shielded by planetary veils that no bombardment can breach. But our strength does not come from conquest alone. It comes from survival, from unity. Gilliman's expression remained grave. Unity with Xenos is heresy. I know, Nero said simply. In the Imperium's eyes, I am damned. But had I refused, mankind would now be nothing but bones drifting in the void. Xenos saved us, Rabute, and in return we saved them. Together, we have built a peace, fragile, but real. It is a galaxy without chaos, without the ruinous whispers of the warp. The Dominion stands because of it. Gilliman's gaze hardened, though his voice was thoughtful. You risked corruption for survival. I risked extinction by refusing it, Nero countered. Tell me, would you have done differently? If the Imperium faced annihilation, if chaos threatened to consume all, and only Xenos aid could save mankind, would you have refused? The question lingered like a blade between them. Gilliman did not answer immediately. His mind raced through centuries of doctrine, faith, and cold reason. Finally, his jaw set. Logic dictates that survival must come before pride, he said. I understand your decision, even if I do not condone it. Nero nodded once solemnly. The two Primarchs stood in silence for a long moment. The hololithic stars shimmered between them, the Milky Way on one side, Andromeda on the other. Two galaxies suspended like twin reflections in the dark. Then Guilliman's voice broke the quiet. "Tell me, Nero, why return now after 10,000 years?" Nero's smile faded. The silver in his eyes dimmed until they were like storm clouds reflecting starlight. "Because I heard his voice." The stars in the strategium dimmed as the hololithic projection faded, leaving only the faint pulse of golden lumen strips and the whisper of power conduits deep within the walls. Guilliman and Nero stood opposite one another, two demigods of a bygone age, the last children of an emperor now half legend, half corpse. Nero Thalasar's silver eyes caught the faint light as he spoke. His voice was calm, but there was a gravity beneath it, the kind that only comes from bearing truth long enough for it to hurt. "It began as a whisper," he said. "At first I thought it was just a figment of my imagination, but one night, as I stood upon the battlements of Nereid's citadel, I felt something, a tremor, a ripple through the silence that had endured for millennia." Guilliman's eyes narrowed. "A psychic signal?" Nero nodded. "Faint, distorted beyond words. The distances between galaxies twist both space and time until they lose all meaning. But through that distortion, I heard a voice. His voice." The air seemed to thicken. Even the lumen lights flickered. "What did he say?" Guilliman asked, his tone low, almost reverent. Nero's gaze turned distant, as though seeing not the chamber, but the moment itself. That night under alien stars. "The words came as thunder through water," he said. "Broken, fractured by the gulf between galaxies. But I knew them. I knew him." He looked directly at Guilliman. He said, "The tide is rising again, my son. Return to Terra." For a long moment neither spoke. The hum of the hololithic generators was the only sound, faint and fragile against the enormity of what had been said. Guilliman finally exhaled, slow and sharp. "The Emperor called you back?" "Yes," Nero's voice softened. "After all these millennia, his will reached across the stars. I do not know what force could pierce that distance, but it was him. Of that I have no doubt. The words were imprinted with his essence. I felt it in my soul." He turned toward the projection table and reactivated the hologram. Stars bloomed once more. Andromeda and the Milky Way glowing side by side, twin fires in the endless void. Lines of light connected them, showing a long, twisting path through the black. "It took me decades to prepare," Nero continued. "The journey through the Andromedan corridor is perilous, even with our advancements. The old gates are decaying. The void creatures beyond the warp have grown hungrier. I could not risk the Dominion's survival for the sake of a single crusade." "You left your empire behind," Guilliman said. "I ensured it would endure," Nero replied. "I left my fleets, my worlds, my people, and my son." Guilliman looked up sharply. "Your son?" For the first time since arriving, Nero's grim poise cracked into a quiet smile. "Yes, several, in fact. The gene seed of the Emperor flows in my veins. It was inevitable that it would find expression. They are not Primarchs, but they are strong, leaders in mind and spirit. My eldest, Castor, rules the Dominion now. He is fair and wise. He understands what must be done to keep our people safe. A flicker of something human crossed Guilliman's face. Surprise, perhaps even faint envy. You succeeded where we failed. You built something lasting. You left an heir. I left a son to guard what I could no longer protect, Nero said softly. And then I gathered my fleet, the strongest vessels we possess. Warships forged with both human and alien craft, bound in purpose, not in faith. I assumed our father had called me for battle. Why else summon a warrior across the void? He raised his chin, the light of the holographic galaxies glinting off his armor. So I came ready for war. 100 ships, the finest of the tide. I expected to find a galaxy ablaze, overrun by demons and madness. I expected to fight for Terra's ashes. Guilliman's lips curved into the faintest smirk. You were not far wrong. He stared at the projection, his hand tightening unconsciously around the edge of his sword. After a moment, he asked, "Did the Emperor's message say why you were to return?" Nero's expression shifted. The faint light from the hologram seemed to drain from his face, leaving him in the cold half-shadow. "There was more," he said quietly. Guilliman looked up. "More?" Nero nodded. "At first, only the command reached me, telling me to return. But as we drew nearer to the galactic rim, as we crossed back into the old warp currents, the rest of the message came through, fragmented, but clear enough." He walked slowly to where his trident rested. The weapon hummed faintly, runes flickering along its shaft like the heartbeat of a sleeping beast. Guilliman's gaze followed him. "What did it say?" Nero paused. The silence that followed was heavy, palpable, a tension that pressed against the walls like a storm waiting to break. When he spoke, his voice was low, resonant, and almost mournful. "Your brother is awake." Guilliman froze, his breath caught, his hand tightening on the pommel of his sword. The words echoed in his mind like thunder rolling through the warp. Nero turned toward him, the trident's glow reflecting in his eyes like lightning across a stormy sea. "That was why I took no chances. Every fleet that stood against us, I annihilated. Every anomaly we encountered, I burned away. I could not risk hesitation in getting here to prepare for his arrival." "Our lost brother," Guilliman murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "You mean to say the other Lost Primarch? Who is he? What is he?" Nero's tone grew quieter still. "He is coming back, Rabute. I do not know how or when or in what form. But Father's words were not a warning. They were a plea." The chamber felt suddenly colder. The light from the hologram flickered and dimmed, as if the machines themselves sensed what those words meant. Guilliman stared into the ghost light, his mind racing through names long forbidden, through records purged by decree. The two, the lost ones, the forgotten. He met Nero's gaze. "I do not know or remember anything about him. What is he, Nero?" Nero paused for a moment and squeezed his trident. "He was the best of us, and the worst of us. And if our father is correct, then we must be prepared for a war beyond imagining." Elsewhere, the stars here were dead. No light, no warmth, only the slow churn of cosmic dust and the whisper of things long buried. A broken planet hung in silence, blackened, cracked, lifeless. Its surface was a wasteland of obsidian plains and fossilized oceans, a tomb to a civilization erased by its own hubris. Deep beneath its crust, within a cavern that once housed forges of titanic scale, something stirred. A forge still burned. The air shimmered with heat and ozone. Sparks cascaded through the dark as hammer struck metal. Each blow echoed through the hollow world, slow and deliberate, the rhythm of something ancient reawakening. A figure loomed over the anvil, towering, broad as a dreadnought, yet unmistakably human in shape. Armor plates, black as void glass, were being shaped and sealed onto a frame of scarred flesh and sinew. The sound of welding, the hiss of molten sealant, filled the chamber. Eyes like dying stars opened beneath a hood of smoke and ash. They burned with purpose, with hate. The figure straightened slowly, towering above the forge. The hammer fell once more, the sound ringing through the tomb like a death knell. Far above, the planet's crust shuddered. Faint red light leaked from ancient fissures. And in the silence of the void, something old and lost had awakened.